Hello, dear lurkers, and welcome back to the Third Age Babylon 5 podcast. Before we start today's discussion, we have to make a sad announcement. The team of our podcast has become smaller. You might not see it right now because we are all here, but sadly, Mira has passed away yesterday. Our little cat, she's also on our homepage. She was in a lot of our recordings. She gave us a lot of ideas. She was our little unofficial production manager, and she sadly was very ill, and we had to let her go. So she will not appear anymore, but she's still a very important part of this project, and she will always live on in our little videos. Yes, the episode we are going to discuss today is interesting because we are finally starting season 3. So in this episode, I always call this the episode with, no, it's not the time for jokes. Okay, now, in the episode, a visitor from planet Earth arrives because Earth has spotted these mysterious ships that we have been introduced to in the last season, right? We have been, right? Yes, we have.
We have the recordings from Kaffer.
Yes, we have the recordings from Kaffer, right? And so someone from Earth has been sent to Babylon 5 to question different species and different ambassadors if they have seen something like that, because Earth tries to keep the population calm, but they have no idea what it is, at least officially. So that's something that we see, like we corner around this old riddle a little bit. Then another thing is that a new character arrives and we get more insights into how the Rangers work and what the Rangers do. And we are also introduced to a new spaceship, a new kind of spaceship. One of my favorite things in the show actually is this spaceship, which we can also see in action and see getting used against the enemy, because we also have a collision meeting with these shadow ships. Is that a good synopsis, or have I forgotten something very important?
No, this is a good synopsis.
Because I just felt like I'm talking and maybe I'm missing the point, but I'm not. That's good.
There were just some very interesting choices of word in there. We
Yeah,
are
that
cornering.
could be.
We are cornering around an old riddle. I'm not sure what that means, but sure.
Yes,
Okay.
sorry. Yeah, I get creative with words while I'm searching for what I want to say. It's a big problem in writing. Sometimes when I write my term papers, I have like, what is this word? Where does it come?
It's a boon in creative writing. So
It's a boom in creative writing. It's a problem in any other kind of writing. Although also in creative writing, if you are not sure what you want to say and you just start getting poetic, it's not good for anyone.
I think that's how we got what we call purple prose. Yeah. Anyway.
So now that I managed this, in this difficult new situation and setting, how about our first impressions?
Yeah.
We can both turn towards.
And if you in all this, you're wrong. I know why I'm sitting somewhere else usually. First impressions. Well, this was certainly the episode that I felt the strongest. Keeping watching, like I want to binge watch the whole season through. I mean, I already prognosed that there will be a new main character, and yeah, instead of main character Kefir, we have Pretty Boy here. I mean,
Okay.
Pretty boy.
I mean, he looks a bit too polished for his position, at least from my perspective.
You haven't even given his name. Is already just going in on him, this poor man.
Yeah, no, he has a name. I think it was Marcus.
Mm-hmm.
Which, yeah, yeah, just really feels really random. But yeah, I didn't expect this kind of character appearing there. And so far, I'm not quite sure what I want to make of him. I'm not even sure if I'm in a position where I say I like him or I don't like him. So far, it's just, okay, he's there. Let's see what he's up to. And yeah, what do we have there? Oh, the new ship, of course. You already said would be coming.
So yes.
Yeah, perfectly fine. It was interesting to see, though. I have to say I'm not that impressed about it. I'm sorry. I didn't like the scene where it was shown. Maybe I would have needed a bit more ta-da moment. But yeah, what I didn't really like was seeing where they were going through the ship. It was like this random dark passageways with that looked a bit like a construction site not really finished. I don't know. It seems to be kind of the thing for spaceships to be designed this way, which was a bit sad considering I think the lens said that it was kind of grown.
Mm.
I would have be happy to see a bit more of this growing elements. How doesn't matter how you could interpret this, but this looked really clearly constructed, therefore it felt a bit boring. What do we have also there? Of course, the whole we are escaping the shadow ship thing was, I think, the one of the most intense action scenes I would say we had so far, which was nice to see, but also the risk Sheridan was taking there. I'm not sure what to make of his decision, but yeah, let's go to that later. I give over to you.
Yes, I can definitely agree that this is like I already said in the last episode of season 2. That this is definitely the point where the show really starts to have this effect that you want to keep on watching, and actually, for me also, I'm totally invested. I need to know what's going on. So yes, definitely always a nice one to rewatch. Yes, I like it how you called him the pretty boy. Actually, yeah, I always call that Shakespeare Company Arise. You'll talk about them later. Why I say that, but I'm sorry for that joke. But yes, he's definitely an interesting character, and definitely shows us that although we already are at this busy place, the universe that we are in is just so much more bigger and so much more complex. So I really enjoy that. And what I also really like about this episode is that, yes, I feel like in general that is a thing for me here, maybe not only in this episode, but maybe in this stage of Babylon 5 of the show. I mean, that we more and more get to know how much bigger the world can get, because we also have this scene with Mr. Morden and with this Earth politician person, where we see Earth, we are on Earth there with the characters, and we see who is acting and interacting with whom there. So we definitely need to constantly see what's going on and how big the problem also gets. That's very nice. And yeah, for me, this spaceship, that honestly, I also think I don't like so much because it is shown so super interesting here, although I find the escape that they make, how they make the escape, I'm very impressed by that. But yeah, I think I'm not going to spoil anything, but I mean, they were introduced to our characters and they are these super secret Minbari things. So just for me here, something is introduced that, yeah, I feel a lot of things for, which we will discover soon. How about you?
I don't think I have to add much to these first impressions. These were, I think, the most comprehensive first impressions that we've gotten in a while. I'll be interested to talk more about Marcus and his shenanigans, especially as the show moves forward. I think in this first episode, he has like a very box standard setup, I would say, in terms of, oh yeah, here's an adventurer who probably has a tragic backstory. Who has ever seen that before? So I can completely understand if you're still in a place where you're like not kind of lukewarm on the guy. But I think, if your comparison point is Warren Cathar, I think, it can only go up from there. I, I'm a big fan of the White Star, of the ship. But
The name, yeah.
yeah, but I also, you both of you were not like very name forward today. It's fine.
Shh, it's a secret.
But I think, we'll have to talk about like how it feels, how it looks also on the interior and such, because I have some thoughts on that as well. But maybe let's try and divvy up this episode as usual into like the big plot threads that we have there. And I guess the main question is, do we want to stay more on the station side to start with? And I think Mr. Ndawi is his name, and his entire investigation, or do we want to go straight up to the confrontation with the shadow ship firsthand?
Let's take it soft, I would say.
Let's just go through all of this station stuff first, because I also hope that would be quick.
I mean, it will be quick, but we have to make sure that we don't, stumble over our own toes here, because there are a few scenes that neither of you mentioned in your first impressions. I'm kind of surprised that he didn't, because we open up more or less exactly where we left off with season 2. We see the station is getting rebuilt after somebody very stupidly shot it up. And we have Sheridan, still kind of working through this whole getting rescued by Angel Kosh thing. And they have a conversation, which I personally really, really love, because if this is your first time, switching on Babylon 5 and getting to learn this show, you learn everything you need to about Kosh and his trolling ways here.
Yes. I was really happy to see that our internet troll version of Kosh is back because, I mean, this interaction. You made a very nice interpretation of this. Do you want to go for it?
God, now I have to do like improv sessions here. But no, I think my favorite, and I think it's a direct quote, is Sheridan just like, really hate it when you are like this, and Kosh just turning away saying, good. And this entire conversation is just Kosh trying to get out of this conversation, and Sheridan complaining about just how Vorlons are. And I think this does a lot for us also to get into the swing of season 3, because everything that Sheridan is talking about here, wow, you're giving me these concise, absolutely useless riddles for answers. This is kind of how we've been interacting with the main story of this show, or like this big plot thread of the Shadows for the past 2 seasons. We are having seen like little hints and riddles and signs and portents and all that kind of jazz. But now we're kind of past this point and we want to actually take action. And the fact that Sheridan, as one of our main characters, has the same drive. He's kind of sick and tired of all this conspiracy stuff, and he just really wants to get things into gear. I think that's what works well, just to establish immediately this show has now a different pace.
Yes, maybe also now that you said that how it picked up at season 2, I think actually I left it out because with season 2, after we had this very slow watch through, I have a difficult relationship right now. But maybe we can also talk for a moment about what do you think of the new intro? Because we have a new intro.
Yes.
And we have a new narrator. And what do you think?
I wanted to go exactly to that point because I think this reflects really well what you already said. We have more upbeat music that's more intense, where you have like, it's more energetic.
There's a lot of harumph in it.
Yeah, a bit more. Well, I would, for my definition, it sounds a bit more epic. Like we're going, the big fight is going to start. With like when you have it in big movies, this would be the soundtrack or the type of music I would put in there. And yeah, with the switch to Ivanova as a narrator, we also see this change, that it's not just the upper people, that it's going down ways, that everyone is getting infected or affected with these interactions.
I also like to think that we get Ivanova, or that we get Susan as a narrator, because it feels more and more that we get into a stage of world history where you need her mentality that we have celebrated so much in the first 2 seasons. So it's like it's getting dark, it's getting dangerous, like everything is going to come together and collide in some ways. So we need her. So she is telling us through it, basically.
And I think it also fits, for one, because she was the one giving us the epilogue of season 2, so she kind of picks up the torch from there. And I guess it also, for me, fits because she, right now, I can easily imagine, represents Babylon 5, the station, more than anybody else. Sheridan gets a new ship, gets a new task as being head of the Rangers and all that. So he is, it seems like, getting more in this role of being the adventurer out there, doing this thing, fighting the good fight, and she is kind of holding down the fort. This is kind of how we see them divided up in this season, in this episode. And this is kind of, for me, narratively makes sense that she kind of picks up the whole narrating the cause of Babylon 5 from this opening cutscene as well.
What I found really interesting is when the characters or the actors getting introduced, that everyone is looking straight into the camera, like, representing the character in a completely different way so far. Like, a bit like a documentary or
It almost has this vibe of like, putting on a History Channel, 2 a.m.
a bit. But I kind of liked it. I can't really put my finger on it, what exactly it is, but I like the vibe it gives.
I think it's fair to say the third season opener is kind of a fan favorite, at least in my experience. And it is, like you said, upbeat. For me, it feels almost like the most, kind of warlike martial kind of one, where
Yeah.
it's like big drums. It's almost like, much.
Then
It's very much pushing in this direction of, okay, we are entering times of war, where season 1 has a lot more, we are in a time of discovery and wonder, and that kind of seems it's taken a step back, which, I mean, is exciting and all that for me as an audience, but also, like, it's a big change. Like, looking back just at the openings of season 1 to 3, you kind of see that the show is taking a trajectory. Like, things are changing massively in terms of tone. And I think this also, I think last season was the one where you get like more like little clips from the scene where each actor is introduced, which reminds me a lot more of a sitcom. And now it's like a lot more History Channel style. So we're getting in a different kind of mood setup here.
Yeah, and I mean, here we are just also more straightforward, introduced to a situation. I think everything else was just a bit more mysterious. And now it's just like, yeah, it was our last best hope for peace and it failed. It's like, here we are, let's do something with it. So, yeah.
I mean, this is one of these things I really like, that Babylon 5 kind of tells the story that in any other universe would be kind of this worst case scenario. Usually the story is always, we have to do this and this, otherwise there will be a big war. And here Babylon 5 is just kind of saying, yeah, so that failed. Now what? Like, the story can't be over. We have to do something.
Which is interesting when you think about today, and I don't want to like talk in detail about anything that's going on in the world right now, but I think it is interesting and valuable. It wasn't a point in the past, and I also think it's now, to have this narration of, you cannot always choose to not be at war. So let's look at how that goes and let's tell a story about it, because it's not always your choice. When you're attacked, when you're dragged into it, you just can't always keep the peace for every price. Basically, that's what it tells us. And also, it's not your choice. It's not your fault, and it's not your choice sometimes.
Yeah, what I think is also interesting is the angle of life goes on. Live with it, work
Not
with
for
it.
everyone.
Yes, but life in general, yeah, the universe goes on. There's still things working, and it's if you have like this horrible situation, don't give up. Just because you lost there doesn't mean you lost everything.
I mean, maybe let's start talking then about the character that kind of embodies all of that. With Marcus, I mean, you already jumped to the point of him being very pretty, which is fair and is a good observation to make. But I mean, he also kind of embodies, like, okay, but what does it mean to be somebody who fights in this war, right? We have our station crew and such. Well, that's kind of nice, but who's the foot soldier in this kind of conflict? Well, that would be a ranger. We've been introduced to them.
Would you see him as a foot soldier in this kind of conflict?
I would see him as more of a foot soldier than, let's see, our station crew and such, in the sense of he is somebody who actually goes out there and, smuggles messages to Narn, where the actual, like, the shadows actually influence the war and stuff like that. Whereas, Commander Sheridan and such, so far, has been a lot more in this kind of, I'm dealing with things behind the scenes, I'm negotiating stuff, I'm collecting information, but he hasn't exactly been going out there to the front lines.
Yeah, sure, but I don't know. I always felt like foot soldier would be the wrong word here, but I'm also not sure how I would call it actually. But for me, the problem right now just is that someone like Marcus is going into all of these dangerous places and does this very risky, dirty work that has to be done from one side, but he's also in a position of having a lot of knowledge and a lot of information and a lot of insight into the world that is so much more than the normal citizen has right now, and much more than the normal foot soldier has that we saw in this other episode, Kropos, for example. So I think he has a kind of own position.
I mean, we can call it that, depending on like what level of this conflict we're looking at. I think for me, it's kind of this thing, foot soldier in the sense of the guys that Commander Sheridan and Dylan command, like the Rangers that are sort of part of their organization.
The ones that actually have to work in the hard sense of.
Yeah. And we will talk about Marcus as a character here, but we also learn a lot more about the Rangers here. And I'm very interested what your impressions are on that front. To preface, my own impression is I think we are learning an element to the Rangers that feels very true to this kind of universe that Babylon 5 is, but still an unusual place there to start with. These Rangers immediately feel very much like something that I would expect more in a fantasy novel. You know, guys with a fighting pike in long robes, with a semi-magical amulet that is forged in tears and holy water. It is said to shed 3 tears. And I mean, yeah, Marcus doesn't really particularly seem to believe in all that stuff. He pretty much says that outright. But there's still a sense that, you know, they feel like a very ancient tradition, which we know they can't really be, because 10 years ago the Minbari and humans just had met and were fighting, and now they're already talking about, oh, we have this old tradition of using human blood in our forging of these things. And I think this, yeah, for me it speaks a lot. It makes a lot of sense to the Minbari culture that we've learned so far, that they're all about tradition, all about these, you know, big, meaningful ceremonies. Of course, this is how they would go about this. But I think it's interesting to see just how quickly in this universe you can get into this more mythical side of things, which feels unusual, but at the same time, we've started off this entire show with soul hunters and techno mages, so it's not like this is a crazy new thing. I think I'm just excited to see more of that side of the universe through Marcus.
Yes. First of all, before I answer to all the things you said right now, I have to make a little of a correction, because you said I called him the pretty boy because he looks good. That's not what I meant with calling him the pretty boy. It's more like I think his whole appearance is a bit off, considering. I mean, he has this. I mean, yeah, okay, has a bit shorter hair, I think, than I have, but I mean, of course, Susan has even longer hair, but when she's working, or if she would be in a position of fighting, she would put them up to not be in her face. And he is like this, yeah, I am wearing my hair open. I have no problem when fighting that my hair flies around and might get into my face. And his whole clothing thing, and he just looks too too well dressed and styled for in comparison to the characters we had so far in similar positions. That's why I'm calling him Pretty Boy.
I think this is why my mind also jumps to him being something I would more expect in a fantasy novel, like pulp fantasy that you
Yes.
get at a kiosk, where, you know, practicality doesn't seem to be very high up on the list. Like, that if I want a practical guy to go in and do real work, I would think of somebody like the Gropos and not of somebody like Marcus.
So maybe I can explain why I call him Shakespeare Company, alright? I don't want to be mean or discriminating to anyone. Maybe let's put that forward there. But I was just used for the first 2 seasons for certain characters to have a very fake British accent. Like, it happened a few times that I wondered about the accent and then realized, oh, it was just not completely real. But also I realized that sometimes when it's very obvious for native speakers, I'm not so good at spotting it because English is not my first language. So because there are so many different dialects and accents and whatever in use, it's also sometimes a struggle to really recognize them. But I just constantly had in mind that the accent must be fake. That it's just this, for this poetry that this character has, this more classical British sound, that it was just trained. But actually we found out that the actor is actually British, so it's probably real. And that was just a bit of funny new information. So that's it. That's not to say anything negative. I like how it is acted and I like how it is written, but I just always thought it's just made for the part and not that the actor actually talks like that, but he apparently does, which is good for him. Just wanted to mention that.
It's also a pretty good development for the show to have somebody with a British accent who isn't an outright villain, because usually that's the trope that you go
Have
for.
a fake accent, so maybe because he's not a villain, he's real, maybe. Yeah. Yeah, so Marcus' arrival, yeah, I have to say that he didn't leave an impression the first time I watched it. I don't know. It took me some time to grow warm with him. I found the Rangers interesting. I found this development interesting. I mean, from if I would not see him as this kind of fantasy character, I would actually enjoy just the development of in general having the Rangers around would seem to me kind of problematic, because I would think that in such a war-torn world made of conflicts, and you have this group that operates in secret, um, you always have to look out for who is actually their authority, who are they listening to, if you have these groups that are a bit of government independent. So I was, from this very very realistic political point of view, at first kind of skeptical of how are they actually operating. But in this fantasy setting, of course, if you only look at it more in this fantastic way, it gets another taste, of course. But so there are two levels definitely, and I think we cannot really answer to both of these perspectives after one episode now. But it's definitely an interesting new kind of dynamic that we have there.
I mean, there's definitely this element of Sheridan as a commander of an Earth Alliance station, sort of kind of having his own little private side endeavor where he commands a bunch of people who are both armed and operating on an interstellar level outside the restriction of Earth Alliance. You know, if your ambassador to another country would do this in real life, that's kind of a problem. You would probably get an inquiry into this really quickly. But I mean, you know, this is where we have to divide sort of the levels of storytelling.
Yes, and we also have to look at, I mean, it's not that these groups in history have not existed and have not been useful, for example, in many of the wars that we had in the past. Similar things. So I would definitely say that this is a useful tool. It's just that at first I was sitting there and was thinking, what kind of story do they want to tell me here right now? How are they going to be used? And also what we don't know at this point, I mean, we know, but not in the first time, you don't know what's the basic conflict that is upon us. So what are we using them for? We cannot answer that right now, but it's an interesting dynamic.
But I mean, what we can start talking about, and I will stop cutting you off right after that, is we don't know necessarily as a first-time watcher, and the Rangers themselves also don't know. Like, we learn a little bit about Marcus's motivations here, and, you know, it is whenever you have a group of people getting, you know, building training camps somewhere for some kind of mythical conflict that they're preparing for, usually that's some kind of cult, and you really want to look at why are people joining this. And I think it's fair to say that even Marcus's motives here are a little bit questionable.
Back to the first appearance, Marcus didn't leave an impression with me either. I was more impressed with the Drazi that helps getting Marcus out of this minefield, because we haven't seen Drazi in this kind of situation so far. We have just the occasional one running around on V5, and we have the green versus purple, where they are not getting off any yurt either. So therefore, it was a bit impressive to see this, how far they're willing to go, which we've seen so far just with the Narn a few times. And when then was revealed that Marcus was one of the Ranger, I was a bit like, okay, that's a bit boring. I thought he was someone more impressive than just one of the guys, like, but what I found interesting was to see that you're not just like, like, hey, I want to be a ranger because I have reasons, and then you help, but that you're just get like trained for
Mm.
it, which is interesting to see, and also how organized the Minbari starting off this whole thing, and therefore also that they're not taking chances, that they try to their best to be prepared for whatever the situation in the future will be.
We have already talked for 40 minutes.
Yeah. 30.
And the recording.
We talked about already a little bit like getting the sense of the universe opening up here, right? And I think what you mentioned is this perfect example for this. We get this reminder that Drazi are a species. There can be serious characters in this species. Not all of them are kind of the jokes that we've seen so far. And we did this entire little segment like exploring the League recently, where you already mentioned being also pleasantly surprised by the Drazi doing all this. And I think when we were doing this segment, we were asking ourselves, like, what does the League of Non-Aligned Worlds actually do? Like, what are they without the Babylon 5 Council? And this might be a really good example for this, that on occasion, they do make deals and they do organize things outside of what Babylon 5 decides. They manage to put something together, like a training camp on a Drazi colony, and that's like government sanction and all that. And I think this is just another reminder, like, for the past 2 seasons, Babylon 5 has been the center of diplomacy and trade, and we've seen them do all the important things. But it's not the only place where stuff like that happens. It's not like everybody else is sort of sitting around and waiting for main characters to arrive before something happens. No, things are happening in the background, and they just now come to the forefront. I find it kind of interesting that you are disappointed by Marcus's status. But I mean, if I wanted to spin this positively, I guess it just tells you, like, to these Drazi, how important just Rangers as an organization are. Like, it's not about Marcus getting out, it's about a Ranger getting out. And, maybe it's good for him that he personally isn't that important, because I feel like it might get to his head very quickly.
Yeah, the problem is maybe for me the combination of him as a character, how he is introduced. You already said with a sad background story, and that's just what he has. What's his motivation to doing this? Yeah, because his brother was a ranger for whatever the reason, and he died, and then while dying asked his brother, hey, can you go on with this for me? Which is, I'm not sure how much of a good motivation this is.
But I think that's like a very fair point to make, right? With everything that Sheridan and Delenn are doing on their kind of Alliance of Lights thing, it's all very much based on personal belief and faith and ideology. And those aren't necessarily like the best foundations to do something like that. And that's, I think, also part of the problem. If you keep the entire thread of the Shadows very secret, who are the people that you can recruit to go into the Rangers? People who just kind of take your word for it. And that's not necessarily a good thing. And I think it's completely fair to say that, like, Marcus's motivation for being a Ranger is kind of flimsy here. It's kind of based on his personal sense of obligation. And that's, for a new character that we meet, probably something we want to deal with eventually.
Are we done with Marcus?
If you want to move on, move on.
Yes, because I would like to move on to, what's his name? Mr. from Earth.
Mr. Dowie.
Mr. Dowie. And maybe we can talk about this little round that he's doing on the station and about these interactions. And I think also in this round that we are doing there, we should talk a little bit about Londo and what he is doing with him and in the meantime. I think that belongs together a little bit. So someone arrives from Earth, and at this point we already have a very difficult, big relationship to Earth, I would say, to put it lightly. It's not the best relationship that we have. So whenever someone from Earth arrives right now, we have to really question what their motivations are. And I think here in this episode, we can say that we see that, what's his name?
Mr. Andawi.
Mr. Andawi.
I think.
Yeah, they know that sounds right.
Okay. So the the Earth person looking for the shadow ship, that he is definitely he seems loyal to Earth and doing his job, but we also see in the end that he's not super high up, so he's not really involved in everything and in all of the plans the Earth government has right now. So yeah, it's just an interesting thing to see that here we have someone who definitely is for our main characters difficult and a threat, but also someone who is not inside of whatever happens on Earth super deeply. He's just doing his job and he's loyal to his government. And whatever else happens is not really in his power. I always find it interesting when we have these characters and not someone being involved in this big conspiracy or whatever, but just a person who lives and does their job.
I think though he's not as intense as we've seen with other characters, it's like he's on a human level. Like you can interact with him, and when the whole thing that Sheridan and Ivanova are going off, he seems it's a bit unpleasant. But while talking to Garibaldi, he seems sort of relaxed. Like, okay, there is something going on here, but not like, oh, you're evil, you're not doing what I tell you. It's more often, equal footage there on, which is quite sympathetic, I think.
Also, Harry actually thinks that he's bonding with Garibaldi. Yes, in this little mind game that they play. Yes.
I mean, I wouldn't even say he just thinks that. I think that's generally kind of what happens here. That, Garibaldi knows, like, this guy's just trying to do his job. We are making it difficult. So let me give you this spiel about just how shitty my job really is. And that kind of, if we both kind of look away and relax a little bit, then things just go off more smoothly than we try to force this.
Yes. So, yes, I mean, maybe in a moment you can say if there's any interaction that you find interesting when they discuss this shadow ship. Is there any one of those that stood out to you as especially interesting?
Well, I would start by saying this. It's a surprisingly reasonable thing for Earth Alliance to do, to go to Babylon 5 and ask for people's expertise. I could easily see that they just say no. If human spies haven't found anything out, then there can't be any information out there.
But also in the end, we see that they actually only do to find out how much everybody knows because they already know. So it's not an honest investigation.
That's although I would say, like, Mr. Ndawi is low enough on the run that for him it's probably real.
Yeah.
I wouldn't assume.
The question, though, is who knows what? Because, spoiler, in the end, we have Morden sitting with this woman, whatever her position is, and they're talking with each other together with some from Psycho in the background, and that's everyone in the room. So we don't know how many people are involved in this. It could be just like a couple of people going on with this. Therefore, I'm not sure how much importance I would put on this.
I mean, what we do know, and what's always worth highlighting, is that there is not really the evil side of this story. There is Psycho, of which we know they have their own agenda. There is the Senator, which is the lady who we know EarthGov has their own agenda. And we have Morden, who has his own agenda. So, like, we know all these three are in on it, but we also know they will backstab each other at every opportunity. So this even complicates the question, like, who knows what? Well, all these three know something and they won't tell each other more than absolutely necessary. So it's probably a huge mess back there, just as much as, people in Babylon 5 have very different, varying degrees of how much they know of what's going on.
Yes, but I think we should also look at the Centauri and acknowledge that as soon as Mr. Morden is involved, it becomes messy in that way that he also freely interacts with different people. For example, all of the deals that Mr. Morden does with Lord Rifa, is that the title and name? Yeah. Are completely independent at times from all the things that he discusses with Londo. So as soon as he has his foot into the door to a government like Earth or whatever, we can assume that the mission is big, I would say.
Yeah. But I mean, let's because we are just absolutely all over the place this episode. It's terrible.
Let's go through these interactions.
Yeah, exactly.
So he confronts Sheridan and Delenn, And who else is in the room? No, it's just the two of them, Sheridan and Delenn and that guy, right?
I don't know. I don't think it matters.
I think the important part is that he's asking Delenn, have you seen this before? And she sort of lies and says, no, I haven't seen this before. Which is true in the sense of, yes, she never knew how this would look like and that she never in person saw this shadow spaceship, but she knows of it. So it's just about linguistics and semantics there, practically.
And she does use this opportunity to, and she will continue this throughout the rest of the show. We'll talk about the second part of this episode in a little bit. But she used already this opportunity to build this up in this very mythological way again. Like the same way that Marcus, for me, feels like he's straight out of fantasy novel. Her description of the shadow ship, which is this unstoppable force of nature that never stops hunting you, that never misses you, that will always bring you down, is just, this eldritch horror. That is not the intelligence assessment of what the Minbari know about the shadows. This is, drenched in personal belief and tradition, which is very fitting to them again.
Yeah, maybe, we should not give that too much attention probably, because it can also just be coincidence or whatever. But I also find it interesting that Sheridan and Delenn are asked simultaneously and not like separate from each other, that they deal with that together. Because I think it would be it's a lot more difficult to just coordinate your reactions to seem as if you don't know what's going on if you're questioned separately.
So I think they were questioned separately.
Sheridan and Delenn?
Yeah, first Sheridan with Ivanova. And then later
She came.
Delenn is called, and Sheridan and Delenn are together in the room, but Sheridan was asked before.
Yeah, that's why I asked, because I thought they were all together, but Susan was in there, so yeah. Yeah, but still, they're still like kind of in this group together where the others he approaches alone.
I think this is also like, once again, pointing to the fact that Mr. Ndawi at this point isn't really trying to antagonize everybody. Like, he seems genuinely to believe, well, Sheridan won't really be able to tell me much more, because if there was interesting information, it would have been in his report. So I'm really here mostly to interview the aliens.
Yeah. Yes, and then he goes on to Londo, and have we seen this vision that Londo has? Or maybe not, but let's talk about Londo. Have we seen this vision? We see Londo constantly having visions, like the Centauri have this thing where they believe that they dream about their death, and then it happens whatever time later in exactly that way. They have, and that's actually something that I find interesting, because they have this very own, like, almost mythical relationship to the universe, but have no successful interactions with warlords or with Minbari whatsoever. But they have this weird mystical thing constantly also in the interactions with the world. And we have seen a lot of visions, or we have seen a few visions of Londo's, but I think this was the first one time we saw that, right?
Yeah, practically we didn't see it. Londo's just telling about it, that he's standing on Centauri Prime where...
Yeah, but we see the shadow ships above his head while he tells that.
Yeah, sort of, yeah.
So yeah, that's the first one, and I think it's always yeah, in a world like Babylon 5, it's interesting to keep all of these things in mind, because yeah, now we have gotten this kind of piece of whatever puzzle. So
I think the interesting thing here is that Lando is telling about this vision, and yeah, to see that he didn't make the connection with Morden. But it seems at least a bit like he is getting an idea, because later on he is asking, while trying to cut his connection with Morden, asking, I never seen your ships. Can I see them now? Like that, which is yeah,
Mr. Morden, of course, is already a step ahead.
Yeah, and moved on to the next Centauri, and yeah, practically the next one up the ladder with the Reaper.
So maybe also do you want to say something to that exactly?
I'd like to come back to this in a moment, but let's start with Jakar first, maybe.
Yeah, do you want to go to Jakar first, or do you want to talk stay here and talk about Londo's desperate attempts to get rid of Mr. Morden?
I would like to go to Jakar first.
Okay, then Jakar. What do you think about that interaction?
I mean, it's frustrating, first of all, because Jakar whipping out his book and giving us like a drawn picture of exactly what's going on. This is not the first time that it happens. And it's just a shame that people continue to not listen to him on this just because it's an old book and people don't like people quoting from the Bible, I guess. It's frustrating, but I wanted to put this in before we go back to London, because I think we learn in this episode that a lot of the things that happened in season 2 were not arbitrary and probably very much orchestrated by Morden to a higher degree than we learned before. With the Narn, it's even mentioned at the very end, like the reasons the Narn were always going to lose this war absolutely horribly is because they are one of the species that have the most knowledge about the shadows, that have actually like written records about the shadows being around. The implication, though, is what we also see. We know the Narn have this, they were taken out. We know the Mbari have this and are therefore also probably perceived as kind of a threat. The Centauri don't have this. The Centauri have Londo having his personal little vision, like you see mentioned, Layla. They also have this special relationship with the universe, and they have been around for a long time. They were much more advanced than the Narn initially. So there's no practical reason why they shouldn't have any kind of records or memories like the Membari or the Narn, but they don't. Which I think tells us something about how their culture kind of functions, how it doesn't really learn from its own history in any meaningful way.
Oh,
which is,
yeah.
Which I think then also points to the fact that this is why they were chosen, like in part by Mr. Morden. This is why he likes dealing with Reefer and likes dealing with Londo, because they're kind of blind compared to everybody else who has better historical, cultural memories of what the shadows are.
Yes, that is definitely interesting. I would just add that it could also be that because history is so vast, that also how a culture deals with its own history can change so rapidly from time to time. But also for very bad circumstances, just this part is just not documented well, and other parts could easily be. Which is also what I would find interesting to keep in mind if we follow this plot through. Can I take a little detour here with the Jakar interaction? Because honestly, what I really love about a show like Babylon 5, and a lot of sci-fi does that, but in Babylon 5 I love it especially, is just how we can actually look into these old books, like Jakar's old book or the old Minbari records, and we actually have these useful information. And we can, from thousands of years old texts and pictures, decode information that is definitely super relevant for things that happen today in a very direct way, which is also like sometimes I think a little bit of wishful thinking that we have when we look at these things nowadays, because there always are these people who try to look at archaeological evidence and be like, oh my god, people 5,000 years ago had batteries because there is this pot that was constructed in a certain way. But every archaeologist knows, no, they didn't have batteries, they didn't use this as a battery, they didn't have anything to use electricity with. But we always have this wishful thinking of there's a pattern, there are old messages, there are cave paintings people have interpreted as a spaceship arriving and things like that. But I love it that it is written in a way where we actually have these old pictures and it's not a misinterpretation, it's actually something useful for us. I find that I enjoy seeing that. Also because I dealt a lot with all of these misconceptions about archaeology findings.
Yeah, I can't go on with the archaeology part, but there are things written down that are really necessary or helpful even today. One thing would be with Corona, there was a lot of the things that happened like with the last pest, the Black Death going around. There are many recordings like from London or stuff like that, where the first few attempts of keeping this down were written down, and from that people learned, and we got to the point of, okay, we can do something probably against this, even though if it's not something we like, but it works. And therefore maybe not back into in time, something the archaeologist can be happy about, but literature certainly is helpful for these kind of things.
I think the balance Babylon 5 strikes here, which also sets it apart from a lot of other science fiction, is to portray a historical record like this Holy Book of Jakar as something that is useful, but at the same time is not made for us. I think a lot of these assumptions, if you go into pseudo-archaeology, it's never just mistranslating, an old pot as a battery or, a spaceship over a pyramid. It's always also going with this idea, oh yeah, this is a secret message left by the ancients for us right now about the impending apocalypse or something like that. And I think this is, what makes the whole Holy Book of the Narn so frustrating is it is an accurate record of things that happened that's just been diluted over time a little bit. But it doesn't really include any instructions on how to deal with this. It's just a bunch of farmers back in the day writing down, wow, these ships showed up and it was really, really scary. I wish we could do anything about it. It's not, Jakar has this book and it has all of these observations, but there is just not enough there. It's not written for him as a manual, as a prophecy to fill out, and then, he can become the next Jesus and solve everything somehow. No, it's just kind of this incomplete puzzle piece, which can be super helpful if the right people get their hands on it, but on its own will not provide you all the context, which usually with all pseudo-archaeology is the same thing. Like, well, there is just not the context there that would be needed to make this an actually meaningfully find, which is sad, but you kind of have to deal with it. And that's kind of the lesson that Jakar keeps learning over and over again as well.
It's really funny how you phrased that, because I not long ago I had a short discussion about supernatural and how no matter what creature appears, how exotic or unique it may be, they always find written down somewhere how to kill this creature. Yeah, with like, I don't know, use a wooden stick and put some virgin blood on it and you can stab it to death. Even though it was never done before, obviously, because this creature is still existing, or this goddess, or whatever kind of flavor creature we have there. Which is, yeah, really odd and strange if you think a bit about it, which is, yeah.
Yeah, it kind of puts in as well, or maybe all of these old people were just very stupid because they obviously had all the answers and just didn't deal with any of these problems. This is stupid. But all right, Mr. Ndawi makes his rounds, and we talked about most of that, I think.
Yes.
Do we want to branch off into Londo's attempts of freeing himself, which I kind of find hilarious because it's a little late into the game to do that, but sure, I guess.
I think it is very naive and very desperate. And yeah, it's like really like he summoned a demon and now is there like, okay, but can you go back? Like, I'm done with you now. You did more than I asked and I'm scared. Please leave me alone. Have a cookie and go. It's yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Actually, yeah, I think it's more of a desperate act actually, because, and I think it's interesting because we have seen Londo managing this culture of the Centauri that is a lot about power play, about mind games, about striking the right kind of deal, but in this old-fashioned way, with people, and managing the super complex social interactions that can literally cost you your head within minutes, actually. And he has been very competent with that because he climbed up very high in his career, and now he is facing this person that has done him a lot of favors, more favors than he asked for, has actually overdone them and horrified him, but definitely always appeared as this wish person just granting him a wish. And now he sits there and is like, okay, but are we done now? And just for someone who is used to this kind of culture, it really seems like he has to realize that this person is not just going. He has to realize that he just opened up Pandora's box and it's just a desperate attempt to make him go.
Yeah, and this naive idea of I got everything I wanted, sort of, not the way I wanted, but what I wanted, which goes back to the question of Mr. Morden. very early. What do you want? It's not how do you want it. It's just what do you want? Um, and yeah, to think that he just gets everything he wants without paying a price for that. It's a bit like I have a genie and now I'm going to wish for everything, and after that the genie will be gone without problems.
I find that interesting because I never got the impression that Londo kind of walks into this thinking, okay, there's, I'm getting out of it what I want, and then I just can make him go away.
No, but at this point,
Yes.
how he is acting there now.
Because I think actually the reason why he is acting like that for me would be that he's scared of what Mr. Morden could do next or ask of him next. So that's why he just really desperately, naively tries to push him away.
I get that. I would still like to finish my thought process here, where I think for me it's because because of how I interpret it, I wouldn't necessarily call him naive or desperate in this situation. For me, it feels more like he's going through the motions. For me, it feels like Londo always has in his head, well, I have this vision of the ships appearing. I have these visions of Jakar choking me out on the throne 20 years from now, like the very first vision that we learned about from him. That to him it feels just like, yeah, there's going to be a price to pay for that, but that's already predetermined. There's nothing I do about that, so I'm just going through the motions up to this point. I'm with Morden, and now I'm not with Morden anymore. And I know this is going to backfire, but like, why do a fuss about it? I already know it's going to happen. This is kind of how I see him going through this, which for me makes the most sense because he is usually like more cunning than that when we deal with him in terms of politics with the Centauri or the humans. And here he just feels so resigned to me, to this fact that, yeah, I'm gonna tell you I want to be done with this. You're gonna tell me how you're gonna fuck me over, and let's just do this.
He doesn't seem relaxed enough for me for
Okay,
that.
I can see that.
Because especially when Morden is saying like, yeah, we will have one last meeting, and then Lana's way of trying to get a peek view at the ships that Morden's people are using. Yeah, it just doesn't feel right at these points for me to accept that. I'm sorry.
That's why we're here, having different viewpoints. That's fine.
I would also agree that the relaxation of that just is missing in him. And this is an interpretation, you can agree with that. But what I always was thinking back to this moment where he sees or realizes just the military force that Mr. Morden can actually have, where the fleet of the Narn is destroyed. I think that is the episode where he is in total shock that Morden could organize that. And I think here we slowly still are interacting with the not so cunning part of Londo, because actually I think he's kind of emotional because he sees all the damage that he's done, and that was never what he wanted. He wanted the war, he wanted to win it, he wanted to conquer the Narn, but this level of death and destruction actually bothers him, and that's why he's so unrelaxed, I'd say.
He had this glorified idea of being the hero, which he obviously is not.
Now he's standing in over a lot of corpses and realizes, whoops, I was that. Did I want that? I think not.
And I think he also had a very idealized version of the Centauri Republic in mind. Like in his mind, I help the Centauri win the non-Centauri war, and I get the noble Centauri Republic back. What instead he got is an empty throne, an absolute madman in Lord Reefer, running amok with his own schemes, and all his friends dying because they were deemed traitors, and he has kind of to deal with the realization that not only is Mr. Morden not the magic wish granter that he wanted to be, but also the Centauri Republic that he wanted to restore just isn't, probably in his eyes, isn't what it used to be, or more realistically, is what it always was, which is kind of an ugly thing to wish back for.
So, yes, I think now we have been around on the station enough. Sorry.
That's a great start.
We'll start over. Yes. I mean, I like it how these two plots that we have here kind of overlap, because we see in one season that Mr. Morden now changes his tone with Londo a lot and tells him, this is your part of space and this is my part of space. And there's this one world that they have an interest in, and Londo actually doesn't ask why. Londo is just like, yeah, well, bad deal, okay, here we are. And it is the world that then Dylan and Sheridan are going to.
Because it's also the world that Marcus comes from.
Yes, genau, right. It is this training camp for Rangers, because, yeah. Maybe also for a second, because we haven't talked about that, and just I want to mention it because we haven't said it when we talked about the Rangers. After everything that we have learned about the Grey Council and about Minbari politics ever since Dylan transitioned especially, we have realized that they also have this ambivalent relationship to the outside world and can be kind of discriminating. I still find it interesting that the Ranger program is something that's very officially and very known on Minbar. Although that we have seen this other side, they are still doing this. It's not accepted by all Minbari, but it is definitely not a secret mission there. I find that interesting to still know about them.
Though I'm questioning again, who knows about this in what sense? I mean, the Drazi, obviously know about this and said, hey, that's okay that you build a kind of train camp on one of our planets. But what were they told? Do they? I kind of can't imagine that they know everything. So the question is, what version was Adrazi told?
But I was also just thinking about this project still having resources and being accepted by the Minbari government, and there are humans being trained there after the relationship they have displayed to humans. So it seems like there's a bigger goal, a bigger problem that and that they are also still so reasonable enough to take the step and are not just blocking out everything as we have seen with Dylan. That is interesting.
Though I would say a large part of this for me is also that the Minbari culture seems to be one where do not ask any questions is like a very big thing. Minbari culture seems like one where it's very easy for, just one or two members of the Grey Council to be like, this is my pet project. I'm just going to tell the Minbari in this city, I'm building my temple there. This is a compound. Do not look into it. And they just won't, because I have this authority over them. And I can easily imagine it like even something that the vast majority of Minbari doesn't know about or would be against because it's humans trained there, can still be conducted because it's, freedom of information doesn't seem like something the Minbari are particularly big on compared to humans. And with humans, I can easily imagine, we expand all over the place and hundreds of people go missing on alien worlds every day. So if, Marcus's family decides to become Rangers, well, nobody's going to follow up on that. I can easily see that too.
It is still worth mentioning because
it is worth mentioning.
If you have, for example, let's really put it maybe on a level of more of on a political level than on this fantasy adventure level. I would assume that a government that is more and more closing up and that is probably becoming more and more discriminating against strange influences and outside forces would definitely not make that possible. So it's an interesting other process there, definitely.
Like you mentioned, of course. Another, just because we're talking about the training camp on the Drazi colony, it's only mentioned briefly, but I like the detail that we also get a confirmation like, oh yeah, the Drazi would like to defend their own planet. They can't because they have like 5 different fronts right now elsewhere that are more important, which once again just is, at the end of season 2, the Narn are attacking everyone around them. Nobody is surprised because that's what you do as an empire.
The Centauri, not the Narn.
That is too. Although, the Narn would have probably done the same. But the Centauri are doing so. But now we see, there's actually, it's oddly convenient for the Shadows that this is happening. So probably, once again, there's a larger plan at work here.
Actually, mixing sweet and salty popcorn is the best thing ever. Why didn't I do that before? Sorry, I had to mention that. I ruined that. It's a new combination.
And that's why our discussions take so long. Anyway.
Leave that in. It is sympathetic.
Edit yourself if you want to decide what to leave in and what not. I will do as I please.
So now let's move on to the
Spaceship.
Yeah, let's move in because I don't know if it's like some kind of anniversary for them, but Dylan has a pretty hefty gift for Sheridan at the beginning of this season.
Yeah, what kind of standards I have for getting married now?
But I mean, we're talking about this this level of, it's pretty amazing that the Membadi pull off this entire Ranger training project. Dylan just privately built an entire spaceship, which everybody in their government is definitely against, with Vorlon technology, which presumably most of the Vorlons would have been against as well. So it's pretty amazing what you can do if you have access to government funding and a lot of free time on your hands. Both of you already talked a little bit about your first impressions on the ship. You also mentioned that the reveal of the ship was maybe a little bit, Dylan would say, it's a private ceremony, not a big wedding, so it's still all a little bit smaller. What I will say, just because you mentioned interior spaces looking very constructed, I'm totally with you on the fact that I would have loved to see like a more grown interior space. On the other hand, like proper interior spaces seems to be one thing that no like Vorlon ship ever has, because why would they? The Vorlons are kind of just energy angels living on there. So probably that's why the Mimbari had to actually use metal and build something in there, because it's not something that Kosh had planned for.
Yeah.
I like the idea of Kosh presenting this new ship and Dylan saying, well, there's no space for a crew. He's just, build it yourself. That's my problem.
Yeah, I could totally see that.
I have to say what I like was that the color scheme was purple, because for me everything that is kind of outside and not really, that you cannot really tell where it belongs, and that's, yeah, purple. I like purple because it's such a mystery color to me. My
Also-
nails are purple.
It's also the color of Nando's coat in the first 2 seasons.
It is, to me, completely clear.
And you don't quite know where he stands. Very ambiguous, this character.
And if he were there, he wouldn't have that coat any longer.
Yeah. And just little sci-fi things that always make me happy is when they talk about their spaceships and it actually makes a little bit of sense what they're saying. I love it that Sheridan complains that they are still using rotating sections to generate something like gravity. And Dylan is like, yeah, no, we had artificial gravity like for a while because they have these force fields, which are super cool. So yeah, that made me really happy. Like Sheridan, like, what? Yeah, you have this technology, like we are still spinning around. I love that.
I also like that, and we will talk about the battle real soon here, this ship is obviously kind of our super weapon, like our ace in a hole in many ways, but every single thing about this ship that is crazy and new and amazing is a very natural progression. We know that ships in Babylon 5 can generate their own jump point. It's just crazy that this ship is so small and can do so. We know that organic ships are crazy advanced in this universe and can regenerate their hull. It's just crazy that this one is so advanced because it has some Vorlon technology like that in there. We know that the Mimbari have a really cool like combat interface system. It's cool that this ship has this as well, and it just keeps going like that, where it's not a super Deus Ex Machina weapon where it pulls out some crazy new technology that was never there before and is just kind of a solution to all problems. No, it's just, it applies the same rules as every other ship. It's just a little better than that, and this is what makes it special. And it gives us a good range of what this ship can and can't do.
Yes, it's not. No, I shouldn't say that. You will be mean, but yeah, you're right. No, I just wanted to say it's not a TARDIS.
For me, it gives off a bit of Normandy vibes from Mass Effect.
Yeah. I think the Normandy is very similar in that, right? It has a very limited superpower in being able to cloak, which notably is one of the things the White Star can't do, which is very unfortunate.
Yeah, the interesting part though is, again, it's a combination of technology of different species,
That
and therefore creating something more powerful through getting together.
That's incredibly. I wonder where Mass Effect might have taken that inspiration from. A small, like, fast vessel that will have a very important role in defeating Eldritch Horrors assaulting the galaxy.
when I was
the idea that it
Mm.
was obviously that good and impressive to keep going with this.
when you mentioned Mass Effect, I mean it's off topic a little bit actually, but when I was in my first physics classes in university for teaching, I was actually trying to figure out like with all of the formulas that I had to work with, a very cool new way of how just a fantasy way of how space travel would be easier, and then I felt so cool for saying like, hey, what if we had no mass? It would be, and Alex was like, yeah, okay, somebody already had. Yeah, I was so sad because I felt so original, and yeah, no hope.
You do really feel idea, guys. It's really, really nice.
Yeah, okay. Um, yeah, for me, I really like the ship because it's purple. I like a lot about this ship. I also like that it is this personal project of Dylan. That it's possible for it to have a project, and yeah, I also like what the ship becomes, and I think I don't want to spoil anything, but I think what we see here is definitely it is this ship that Sheridan can use, that is secret that not many people know about, and that the people who see it do not know where it comes from, who it belongs to, and what it is able to do. So it becomes like an important meeting point, and I also this is maybe yeah also about the symbol that this can be, because I like it that here we have a place outside of the station where all of our important main characters can go when things become dangerous or important. I like it how we are there with who is on board. I think Susan, Lanier, Delenn, Sheridan, a few more Mimbari. Anyone else?
I don't think Susan is on board.
Susan, not a.
Okay, sorry, she is on. She is helping with a battle. She is shooting.
The bonehead maneuver to. Yeah, she's on board.
What I found really interesting to see is that first we have the Mimbari that are on the ship are not from the warrior caste. Dylan explains why, which is nice. And what I found really interesting here is that they do not speak a language where they can directly interact or understand Sheridan, which is the reason why Lanier is going for the translation job in this episode, which is nice to see because that was more ignored or not an important part so far.
It's thematically also something very nice why, usually you would have a ranger in charge of this, and rangers speak also Mimbari and are familiar with Mimbari, which is one of the things that Marcus demonstrated in the very beginning. Like, once again, just putting very high this being multilingual, being multicultural, actually kind of a useful thing to have. And if we want to put together this alliance of species to stand against the dark, it's kind of a prerequisite.
Yes, and I think it's also always nice when we have a sci-fi universe where people actually thought that through. Because, in Stargate, I've sometimes complained about why is another galaxy speaking English. Of course, you cannot always find a good explanation in all the settings for everything, but I like it if people actually put some thought into it.
And I would say if your entire premise of your setting is exploring different cultures across the galaxy, not putting languages in there is it's one thing not to have the space
Yeah,
to understand.
but some people then also would just say we have a general translator and it's automatic, so it works.
Also very boring.
Very boring, yes, but some do that. So I like it that there is some thought for that. Yes. So, we have talked about the ship, and I think we are done with the ship for now. So, anything about this space battle that we get in the end? You already said it is one of the most intense space battles that we had so far. I also have to say that I always like it that it's an action scene where I actually follow a plot line. Like, it's not just. I love space battles, so if they just look great, it's also nice. But it's also that's when you follow the story, you realize what is happening, and you understand what is happening and what the ship is doing.
I think there's even an entire little character arc in this space battle, because one of the reasons it feels so intense, at least for me, is that Delenn is absolutely terrified of everything. And I think most of season 2 was Delenn kind of thawing off a little bit. She was very much in command and very distanced in season 1, I feel like. And now she's taken on a lot more human vulnerability. And I think this was kind of a high point of that, where she really believes there's no way you can win against the Shadow Vessel. It's kind of this perfect avatar of this intangible threat that they are facing. So her getting to see how Sheridan tackles such a problem and sort of, get walked through how you can actually not only see this conflict coming but win it, I think does a lot for her to kind of find this confidence again, and that's just really great to see.
Also, their general reaction to Sheridan's idea of, hey, we could open another dump point in another dump point gate. Which just gives really the idea, okay, this is bad what he is trying to do. On the other hand, they obviously have not much options.
That is very interesting, yes. And before we get to that, before they have this whole idea of the jump point, there is this moment where the shadow ship actually misses the...
Yeah.
And that's interesting. We don't get an explanation here, and I couldn't give an explanation without spoiling stuff, but I just want to...
They
Get an explanation.
Yeah, the explanation is that they are trying to push this unknown ship to them to do a few maneuver. Please say that for me. I can't talk anymore.
I'm not sure what you're trying to say. That
How they're reacting to what they're attacked with, to get the point of identifying who is owning this ship, what kind of species created this.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think they have the assumption that that is what they are doing, but I would say that at some point later, we can talk about another option of why they actually didn't hit. But okay, then there's another level to this that I find interesting. I just want to point this out because I like it how on so many levels this ship is thought through. Yes.
I think there's also this level to our characters catching up to what we already know. We've at this point seen the shadow ships in a lot more fighting action, and we actually know that they are vulnerable. They can be hit with non-weapons and made to bleed and be damaged and all of that, but our heroes don't know any of that, and so it's kind of interesting to see them work with this assumption of the shadow ships being this unstoppable force and then finding ways to rationalize, like saying, oh, they didn't hit, they never miss, so it must be confused by us, it must want to know what we are and trying to get us. Whether or not that's actually what's happening is a different question, but it makes sense given what our characters know, that this would be their natural assumption. And that's kind of, once again, where it is really helpful that we can follow the action, we can follow the thought process that they have along the way there.
Yes. Yeah, for me, actually, another point of that scenes of the scenes that happen there actually is that just this thought. I mean, in the end, they blow up the what is
The jump gate.
the jump gate. I was looking for the word. In the end, they blow the jump gate for that was near the markup homeworld, and just the thought that there actually are people using that and stealing, like grave robbing this whole planet. It has just died of a plague. I always get goosebumps because I would be so fucking scared to get infected with that or something else when there's like a world with 2 billion corpses lying around, 2 billion corpses from a plague. I would be terrified. I find it weird that there are even people who do that. Yeah, that always really sticks with me from that episode each time.
I would assume that they're like full-on hazmat gear and spacesuits and like not taking any chances, I would hope.
Yeah, but I mean, if they are just like people stealing stuff, I don't know. It's just an odd thought to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so what do we think about that resolution? That works, how it works.
Once again, it feels very much like there's a sense of scale to the setting now. Space is big, but at the same time not so big that we have random jump gates lying around anywhere. Like in this network, if there's a jump gate, there's going to be a useful planet next to it. If there's a useful planet currently unoccupied, that's very unusual, and there's probably good reason for it, and I like that we've seen this reason before. I also really like that this isn't painted as, oh my god, Sheridan has to face this big moral dilemma and is put through like the ringer with that, but had like very matter-of-factly, like, yeah, it's sad that we destroy this jump gate, but the people there are probably just looting and pillaging. So in this in this situation, I'm not going to fret about the lives of these people that I might endanger, or like a random ass freighter that is nearby that might get blown up as well. Like, no, this is a life and death situation against the galactic threat. So be professional about it and do it. I think this is where other shows, other stories, Mass Effect maybe even would have put like a very meaningful BioWare TM moral choice there. And it's nice to see that we kind of get around that a little bit here.
Yeah, that it's more of a practical decision. That is that where the problem is more like, are we going to do this or not, because we might kill ourselves, and not the consequences it could have on someone else. And I think therefore it is also more interesting and intense to watch.
I think so as well.
I always like the scene when it's all over and survived, and what Linear then says.
You really loved this.
Yeah. He is so serious and completely unironic, and it's like the most sarcastic comment ever.
Yeah, I was when he was saying these words, I was sitting there. Oh yeah, Linear, you're one of my fandom people now.
Beautiful. And I also like that we have this conclusion of, yes, that worked. It's never going to work again. This is a very much a one, because like you have this issue in this show. We want to confront the shadow vessels. Like, finally, for like 2 seasons, we've watched them just slice and dice everything, and nobody can stand against them. We want to start making them a fight that we can win. But if we can just win these fights easily now, that's gonna make it very boring as well quickly. So how do you create these confrontations where we can eke out a victory, but it's not really making things any easier, and doing it this way where it's a one and done opportunity that we can kind of take advantage of. That is really nice.
Though, to be fair, technically they could still have a comeback, like that the ship didn't really get destroyed, that they
That is still
just closed like the door behind them, and now they couldn't move through there, but that the ship is still existing and there was nothing destroyed except the jump gate.
Let's hope the show isn't as cheap as that, but it is very possible, of course. The same way that the battle-scarred Warren Keffer might come back to warn them about this, and we get this whole revenge arc going on. It's all on the table at this point in the show.
Yes, all right. So we are now in season 3. We hope that we will have more regular uploads this year again, to not do it in real time once more, but a bit quicker. In the meantime, you can find us on Facebook, where we have our own discussion group.
Thank you so much for watching, and see you next week.
Until next time.